pleasure to have one of the outstanding alumni of SAISD in Central High School as our guest today, who's visiting our community to teach us something about helping kids with concussions. But this is Dr. Hunt Batjer, and you graduated in late 60s or 70?
It was 1970.
You're a young whippersnapper.
Calvin Coolidge was president. The country was on a roll.
Well, I was already married and teaching school then, Dr. Batjer, so your references to being old is not, I understand being old. You have been we are so proud of you, and you were an outstanding athlete, a pitcher, and were drafted, but didn't accept it. You went on you chose well.
It was interesting. My best pal, Ramsey Koshak, and I were both drafted. He was the catcher, I was the pitcher. And his father had just had a major heart attack. I think it was during our junior year. And Ramsey was very concerned about his future. Ultimately, he lived through that and did well. But I think that was really on Ramsey's mind, and he went ahead and signed, and with Boston out of high school. And my dad had been captain of the Texas tennis team when he was in school, and he did some homework, and he, shall I say, strongly recommended that I consider not signing. In my household, that was sign and I'll kill you.
I had a father just like that, and it served us well.
Mm-hmm.
So you opted then to go on for academics.
Well, I played. I went to University of Texas on scholarship, and ended up hurting my arm early on. Got a rotator cuff. Did not pitch well there, and was in pre-med. So I went ahead and went straight on to medical school.
Well, you probably know we have a student there we're so proud of, and who is on the baseball team at Christian Summers, who's on the baseball team at UT, and our audience knows very well that I bleed burnt orange. So that had nothing to do with you being a guest on this interview, but it adds here. So you went to University of Texas and then went to medical school, and you are a specialist, and many say one of our nation's leading experts on what?
Well, I'm a cerebrovascular surgeon. I trained under Duke Sampson at University of Texas Southwestern. After medical school, I went to do my residency training at Southwestern. And Duke is an international figure in cerebrovascular disease. And we developed a fabulous relationship, and it's still there. And I went on after training. I did a fellowship year away in London, Ontario, as well as Queen Square in London, England, and came back and joined Duke. I believe it was about 1981 on the faculty at Southwestern, and we just had an unbelievable collaboration over the years, which was, for me, it was the perfect opportunity to be mentored by one of the great figures in the field. And I was there I remember the first case I did as an attending was a giant thrombotic basilar artery aneurysm, which is a slightly high-end problem. People go their lifetime without doing that. That was my first case as a practicing neurosurgeon. So it was a huge leg up for my own experience, and to be able to interact with him and do things together creatively and hopefully advance the field over the years.
And the reason that our community hospital folks brought you or invited you back is for you to teach us about a topic that I think, from having been in the school business for decades, we are very late in learning about, and that is about students that get concussions primarily from athletic injuries. And so how on earth did that become an injury? How did that become something of interest to you as a surgeon?
Well, I really trained at Parkland Hospital, which is a major trauma center, so I saw tons of brain injury and spinal cord injury over the years. But it wasn't really a part of my academic life. Although I've always been I love athletics. I've never stopped doing things, jogging, golf, and other things that the advanced age will permit. And so I was at Northwestern, having just introduced a good friend of mine as visiting professor from the Brigham, who's going to talk on professional sports. He was very active in sports. And I got paged by my secretary because Elliot Pellman from the NFL wanted to speak. I went, that is truly strange. And because I've really not been involved with sports medicine for a long time, except indirectly seeing patients with various types of problems, but not active. And I finally got Elliot later in the day, and it was said that they had fired the co-chairs of their concussion committee and were doing a search and would I be interested in looking at it. And I thought about it for a minute. I said, gosh, that's an interesting thing with millions of kids, not just 2,000 professional athletes, but millions of kids at risk. The numbers of injuries being reported were really going up. At the same time, our soldiers were coming back from Iraq, Afghanistan, with very serious disabilities from trauma to the brain and other body parts. And that, to me, was very interesting. And we were also getting reports since certainly the early 90s that some autopsy data was showing permanent damage in some pretty young former professional athletes who had committed suicide and had a very disastrous neurological course, and then had histologic abnormalities in their brain that was suggestive that this was trauma related. So it really was an amazing kind of point in time where I was interested in exploring some new ideas, and once you reach advanced age, you get tired of trying to move the same Rock of Gibraltar, and it's intriguing to say, I wonder if that one could be moved. I know that one can't, but just taking on different concepts, different contexts and problems, I think is an interesting part of our
How long ago
ongoing
was
development.
that you started on?
2 years.
My goodness, but thank goodness you have. And a lot has come about in these 2 years from what I read.
It really has. It's a huge opportunity, and two of my good friends, the commissioner, when he called, he said, we really want you to do this. Would you be okay if we made Dr. Ellenbogen the co-chair with you? And Rich and I had been great friends for a long time, so it'd be fantastic. He said, one other favor. We really admire Dr. Mitch Berger from UCSF. He's the chairman of neurosurgery there. And he's a travel club buddy and a many decades friend. All my kids are friends of his children. And so it was convenient to have just two of my very good friends and colleagues to be the nucleus of this effort. And we've really enjoyed the chance to get in there, get the best people in the country involved, and get after the problems. It's been productive. You
mentioned the commissioner, and I'm not sure that our audience realized you meant for the National Football League. Is that
Correct.
right?
Roger Goodell.
Okay. And in 2 years' time, what do you think has been something that we have learned that we will do better at in our country?
I outlined some of those in the presentations. We have a prospective database that is being finalized that will allow us to track players through their career, for knowing their genetics, knowing what their brain imaging studies look like, knowing what their comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension, smoking, substance abuse.
So you're establishing a baseline.
Correct. What we don't know about the players who have had unfortunate courses is anything except what their brain looks like under a microscope. We don't know anything about their past. We're looking to put on-field impact testing to the brain and the skull into that database. We have the technology now to monitor every impact a player sustains, practice and play through their career, that would go into this database that would then follow them after retirement, so that we then will have the chance to detect what are the elements that can lead to further neurological problems down the road. That's one of the things. Some rules changes. I just found out last night that a rule change that occurred at the Combine last year, where the line of scrimmage on kickoffs was moved up to shorten the acceleration time. The concussions on kickoffs through week 12 have been reduced by 50%.
By one rule?
One simple rule.
Oh.
So yeah, those are just things that they're low-hanging fruit. Return to play issues. The commissioner issued a rule right after we got involved that any symptoms of concussion, you're out of practice or play. That has now been taken right down through the Zachary Lystet law, now in 34 states, Texas included, where any student has to be educated about the importance of concussive injuries, and they are out with any symptoms, not just knocked out, but a very conservative definition of concussive injuries that can be headaches, vertigo, unsteadiness, feeling dinged, feeling groggy. All those things count. You're out. And to be cleared to return to play, we've got a very nice program with the CDC that I was very impressed that our trainers in the region and so on are adopting those stepwise mechanisms to get kids back into competition.
And that's an unpopular decision, but so important. And by unpopular, I mean kids want to get back, and especially if they're a good athlete, their parents want them to get back, and coaches. And how many of my years we have prematurely allowed kids, not knowing the future down the road of how much we were impacting kids. Nobody did that with any malintent.
Absolutely not.
It was, but it grieves me to know how many times we've allowed kids through the decades with our zeal for winning. And you're a competitive man. I have never been an athlete, but I love my teams to win. And so what I'm so grateful for the research you all are doing that will, even though your commission is through the NFL, that body of research we are paying attention to at the high school, junior high school level. And I hope and pray that even little children's sports that don't have necessarily the teeth of rules, the little league sports, even of football, will pay attention to these rules. Because that one rule that you just, as you called it, low-hanging fruit, that's so easy. Just do the things that. So I wait, and I saw at the where you spoke last night, I was tickled to death because we didn't direct our coaches and trainers to be there, but they were all there, and they came from other cities. I saw in the parking lot school vehicles from many miles around us who came to hear you. We want to keep kids safe, but we have to know what to do. And so I'm glad you were intrigued, to use your word, and weren't so busy doing the things you were really trained to do that you took this on.
Well, there was an event or an occurrence last night where a trainer from San Antonio came up, and we've been talking a lot about the second impact syndrome, which is a huge problem for children, not much of a problem for professional athletes due to the maturation of the brain, the myelinization of the brain that occurs well into the 20s until you have an actually mature brain, and that helps protect against, I believe, some of the effects of concussive injuries. And he'd lost a child last week from a second impact. The problem was the first impact wasn't detected, the first concussion, and the danger here, which all of the work we're trying to do is to make sure that the schools, the trainers, the physicians that are involved in seeing injured athletes is recognizing that one of the great things we teach our kids in sports, play through the pain. That's a great life lesson. It sets people on the right course. It makes them realize that there are more important things than me. And we have
to not be quitters.
Of course. And the competitive aspect of the games is fantastic for our futures. But you play through pain, but you do not play through a brain injury or a spinal cord injury.
There's a difference in a hand and a knee and a foot and shoulder playing through pain.
Yes.
And playing through where your head, because there are how many kids that you and I both have seen who are so tough. And just to say, well, okay, my head hurts a little bit, or I'm a little nauseated, to them might seem like nothing.
Yep.
And it's an education.
It is, and you think about it at the professional ranks when some contracts yield a large check if the player shows up on Sunday. So you've got a massive competitive as well as financial incentive to sort of sweep it under the rug. And I think, we have worked very hard to help change that culture, that starting at the professional ranks and educating kids that this is a different issue than the knee or the hand that you talked about. And I think at the professional level, one of the big helps is that they have been seeing these reports of athletes that went on to have disastrous decades after their playing career, sometimes ending in suicide, other times ending in bad neurological outcomes. They're scared about their future, and you think their careers average 3 years in the pros, and that is not much time. And we're trying to make sure, guys, you got 50 to 60 more after that. So you've got to be thinking about that as well. And that's a real culture change that I think is occurring. We're seeing better reporting. The reports are that last year there were 17% more concussions reported than the year before in the NFL. So it's good.
We in the Texas immediate response was not only to require each community to have concussion committees, but a little bit on helmets. And helmets are the most expensive part of the equipment, at least that I'm aware of, or the budgets that I approve. And yet even the very best helmets that money can buy are not enough if we overlook some of the things that you all are finding that we can do.
Let me make a point or two about helmets. This is a really, really important area. Kevin Guskowitz from our committee from Chapel Hill is an outstanding young man that is a former trainer, now a PhD and department head. There is no such thing as a concussion-proof helmet. The current generation of helmets that are used at the adult and youth level came about as a result of catastrophic injuries occurring back in the early parts of the last century, when you had dozens of on-field deaths every year. Those leatherhead helmets that I'm sure many of your listeners have seen pictures of and no personal experience with, unfortunately set the stage for cataclysmic injuries with skull fractures and subdural hematomas and dead players on the field. That problem and Teddy Roosevelt's stimulus, which formed the NCAA, ultimately led to the NOCSI standards. The National Operating Committee for Standards in Athletic Equipment, NOCSI, is charged with assuring that the various components of armor meet certain requirements. that requirement was set to prevent catastrophic failure. It is a drop test. That resulted in stimulus to our manufacturers to create an instrument that would survive that drop. Right? And that's the shell that you see on all our players now. Interestingly, that shell has some issues. It may or may not be beneficial for the concussive type injuries.
Oh my.
We know it prevents the catastrophic failure. People don't die on the field. But it may actually be bad for concussions. That's something we're looking at. We just don't know that yet. We suspect that material fatigues with time. That doesn't matter to the professionals because they clear out the helmets.
But it does to
year.
Public schools.
In a bad economy, there are hundreds of thousands of kids out there playing with 20-year-old, 10-year-old, 20-year-old helmets. And that is probably not good. There's no further testing that goes on. NOXI doesn't have the resources to do it. The manufacturers don't have the resources to do it. And I think that's something that you should definitely have on your radar screen, that a policy of potentially retiring, say, a quarter of them every year would be something that would allow you to make sure there's nothing older than, say, 4 years.
Wow.
On the racks.
Well, and boy, we barely then scratched the surface in Texas by the new requirement that they have to be looked at and improved. Reconditioned, that word was eluding me, ever so many years. You can't play with them after so many years until they've been reconditioned. But the reconditioning wouldn't meet the test you've just talked about, that
Correct.
is the...
Correct. Reconditioning takes out all the old padding.
Works on the connections.
Correct. And does nothing to the shell except clean it and paint it.
Wow. And
it's the shell that we're worried about. There are other issues here, though, and that is fit. Hair and fit. Haircut. Does the helmet still fit? And those things are probably critically important and also kind of low-hanging fruit, but we've got to do the work to...
But that's expensive, tremendously expensive. It's one of those issues we're going to have to come to grips with. And by expensive, I don't mean to imply because it is, and because we're in a cutting era of our lives, nationwide, if not worldwide, that this has to rise to the top of our priorities. Well, I'm incredibly interested in this topic because I feel responsible for the hundreds of young people who are from 7th grade to 12th grade who want to participate in this. And since you're a baseball guy, what about the helmets for baseball players? I mean, they're hit.
Sure.
Is there are you working, even though you're on the commission for the National Football League, I know you're interested in that.
Very, and one of the things that Rich and I both work very hard at is making sure that we're coordinating amongst other sports, and I know the commissioner is very supportive of that. The person that does the concussion-related work for Major League Baseball is a good pal of mine, Alex Volodka, who's a neurosurgeon in Austin. Oh. So it's not, we're very up to speed on what each other are doing to make sure we synergize.
And share.
And the other people involved in the helmet issues now are our friends from the Department of Defense. And we're actively engaged with them. Jeff Ling from DARPA, which is Advanced Research, DOD, is a wonderful guy. He's a neurologist, but in spite of that, he's actually got a great personality and a great sense of humor and energy. Please don't record that. But he's about that tall, but he's absolutely got fireball energy. But they have enormous resources. They have a consortium with our engineers at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, John Giannopoulos and his group. And we are looking at joining that consortium, which is called the Institute of Soldier Nanotechnology.
Wow.
And it's a way that the government and MIT are working together to do everything humanly possible to protect our soldiers. And the things coming out of that work group are unbelievable. And you sort of hear snippets. Now we're going to have real access to their science, to their laboratories, where we can take problems, and we'll have the best engineers in the world attack that problem. And the nanotechnology side is going to be a way, I think, to take a shell like we have, coat it with a material, and develop a virtual deceleration zone that will help deal with the issue of the skull stopping and the brain continuing to move. But this collaboration with our Department of Defense will assure our youth that the minute we have a breakthrough that will protect our soldiers, it will go straight to sports, and it will not pass go.
That's so exciting.
It's fantastic.
Wow.
There's an opportunity.
Don't you think that early in, since we're somewhat close in age, even though I'm your senior, that early in my career, we didn't collaborate. Fellow researchers didn't do as much collaborating, the education field and the business field and et cetera. But I've seen it, I really saw it begin in about 20 years ago and has just gotten more and more. Certainly in my business and in the medical field, I read that to get big grants, the more that we collaborate, and I see medical professionals collaborating countries apart, certainly states and medical schools apart, who have similar interests to be able to tap into funds. And so this communication with the Department of Defense and an unlikely partner of sports, which is really looked upon, I guess, more as a pleasure, where the war industry is, usually there's been a great gulf, I would think, between the researchers talking. And since war has changed, I think this is tremendously promising to me, that it could accelerate your knowledge that you all are able to get, even though certainly the Department of Defense budget, and we're so aware here with our good fellow Air Force Base, just like my business is being cut. They're investing with Colonel Damiano, the leader at Goodfellow currently. We're in lean times, but the research dollars have got to be very meaningful and to go toward that will impact. The more people that it can impact,
Absolutely.
I would think, the more attractive to the deciders of who gets the funds.
Correct.
Well,
this is, the commissioner is really, really proactive on this. He's way ahead of this problem and is committed now $100 million over 10 years for head injury research. That's going to be put into the NIH and a foundation so that it can be peer-reviewed at the most robust way, looking toward team science. And I think the NIH has made it crystal clear that team science is what they want to fund, which is totally appropriate. Story Landis with NINDS, this will be under her aegis. This is absolutely what she wants to do. And I think, we have to, if you look at where the resources are, well, you've got an entity like the National Football League. There are resources there. You look at the Department of Defense. There are always going to be resources there. Share them.
yes.
Share talent.
Well, I enjoy being a part of collaborative groups, and especially when they're partners in the group that are not a part of my everyday discussion, education discussion. We all get better. We all get better because of that. And all right, so what if you, looking down the road in the next year as well as, it's hard to look much past a year to 2 years with accuracy, really, even though I think I'm an idealistic person. I enjoy looking down the road. But our world is changing so fast, both through research as well as the economy. Who would have thought? I never would have dreamed 3 years ago we would be as in the economic struggling times to the degree that we are. But look down the road and project. What do you envision that excites you that could be in our world? You mentioned a way, which I didn't interrupt you, but I want now you to address. How will we know? Will it be in the helmet that we will be able to be more acutely sensitive to injuries?
Safety equipment is one, but not the only variable here. Understanding what the genetic predisposition to
rule that out.
We have the ability in a blood test or even a buccal swab to learn everything we need to know genetically about each individual.
Okay.
And there is pretty good evidence that there are susceptible people to damage, and there are probably people that are very resistant to repetitive head trauma in an ApoE gene where they certain alleles have the ability to scarf up or clean up damaged neurons, others don't.
Wow.
So that's the susceptibility side, and that's part of what we're doing in our prospective database, so we'll know. It's going to take some time to confirm some hypotheses, but it's going to be done. So I think that's a key element. We're going to learn more about treating concussions than just rest. And I saw a release of some pre-publication data from Department of Defense yesterday, where a modality that you have in this community was actually effective for soldiers in getting their symptoms to resolve quicker after percussive and concussive injuries. That's something that's going to be very important as this comes out.
Give me an example of what we might do instead of just in addition to rest. What do you predict?
I think there are some pharmacologic avenues that may provide benefit. Nothing has yet been shown to be beneficial in that arena. Hyperbaric oxygen is what I was referring to. It is FDA approved for certain indications now. Just in offline conversations with colleagues in the DoD, and seeing this release, which is not prime time by any means, it looks like that is a very optimistic
Why hadn't we thought of that sooner? That has been around. I had to do that, go under that some years ago because of a particular thing in my life. And you would think now that you're mentioning it, but I never had thought about it till you did, what the little I know about it, just from having researched it because I participated in that, I think there would be hope for that. Can you hear an educator here encouraging you go? There are 5 studies in the pipeline that's hopeful.
Right now. It's very, and the way the soldiers are being studied is totally consistent with athletic injury and protocols that could be done. And I think especially for young people, if you look at the recovery time after a concussion, you've got a professional athlete that typically returns to play within 6 or 7 days, and the students 3 to 6 weeks, typical. That there's some anatomic and physiologic reasons for that difference, but that window could potentially be narrowed by some of these modalities.
Well, that's an expensive remedy, the hyperbaric. There are not that many even in the city, but my goodness, for something serious, that would be a wonderful thing. That's neat.
Yep.
So you've enjoyed this enough that you think you're going to stay a part of it in a contributor.
As part of the head injury and professional sports, absolutely. I think it's very important for us to make sure sports. I personally, this is me, not the National Football League speaking. I want sports to be robust. I want it to survive. It's got a lot of. It's taken a lot of bullets in recent years, There are cultural things that it brings to our society that I think are important for us as a leading culture of the world. And it's one of the things that kids grow up with that helps them understand that we have a great position in the world of leadership. It needs to be nurtured, preserved, and advanced. They can learn some of those values on the playing field. But they're at risk, just like you're at risk when you drive home today, in a car, in a plane. Things happen. You've got rapidly moving heavy objects that can hit each other with disastrous consequences.
And we don't stop doing that.
We have not yet stopped traveling.
Well, I applaud so much and am so grateful for you latching on when the invitation came your way to being a part of this. It is so tremendously worthwhile. And now that I know that our soldiers and our athletes will reap the benefits together, that is beyond exciting. I don't know what the next word. I usually say really, really to add to exciting. So do you have, what percentage of your time is spent on such issues, and then the other percentage is on your actual profession of being a neurosurgeon?
I have 3 1.0 FTE jobs. And it works okay. We try to do a lot of our NFL work by teleconferencing, which helps a lot. We do 1 or 2 meetings on Park Avenue a year with the entire committee, but it's done very efficiently. We come in one night, start the meeting early, have people heading to the airport by 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. So that's pretty efficient for everybody's schedule.
Well, so the rest of your world is on, you're a surgeon. You spend the bulk of your time in the operating room and taking care of people who have other things that are happening inside their head.
Well,
you're a fixer.
I have a lot of different issues. I have 2 surgical days or 2.5 a week. 1 outpatient day where I see nothing but clinic patients. Then I have administrative things both for the department and for the institution, and my national obligations that are sort of enmeshed in that. And then the NFL is I've got a great administrative assistant, and if it doesn't go through her, it ain't happening. And it can be Sunday morning. It doesn't matter. She'll get it on and get all the work done.
I have had an informal Carol Ann Bonds research study for many decades about my students. And I don't even have much recorded, but it's up here in my mind. And that is, there is a huge correlation between students who have had music exposure to also their science interests, and how, and I'll tell you what started it for me. I noticed in interviewing students years ago when I first became a principal that were at the top of their class, and I would say, tell me what you've been in high school, and they would be like the top 10 students of their graduating class, and this was years ago. And then what are you hoping to major in, knowing that 18-year-olds are probably going to change, as I did. But it has been uncanny, even through here in San Angelo, the high percentage, I would say 85% or more, who have had some musical experience, either through playing an instrument, a band, orchestra, being a part of a choir, and they are highly interested in the sciences, going engineering or pre-med or some science-related field. And that was true in my family. We were required to play a piano plus an instrument, no matter whether we wanted to or not. And mine was the violin. And so What is the correlation to brain research now about keeping sharp? Since we know that there are, we're living longer, but not necessarily a higher quality of life. What can we do, people who want desperately to live a higher quality of life and stay sharp?
It's a fascinating area. Data came out in the 1990s about exercise. This started in the animal laboratory, that animals that exercised maintained a higher state of cognitive sharpness than those that were senescent, which was approximately the time I bought my treadmill and continued my marathon experience. So clearly exercise is one of those things that probably enriches the environment. We've got good data now that one of the explanations for that and the preservation of good cognitive function relates to the stem cells in our hippocampus, which is a memory-related structure in our temporal lobes. We are born with a certain number of stem cells there. There is a myth that we're born with, a billion neurons and we lose some every day and we end up with a shriveled up brain at the end and it's not pretty. In reality, though, that we have the potential to grow new neurons. In addition, with exercise of various types, we can stimulate sprouting of our existing neurons. So you can actually take musicians, for example, I grew up with a bunch of them, they're kind of crazy and they've got weird brains, but the weird thing about it is their primary auditory cortex is thicker than ours. Their motor cortex is thicker. Their cerebellar vermis, their corpus callosum, their musical activities result in thickening of brain tissue.
And that's good.
It ain't bad.
I just wanted to make sure I was understanding.
Enlargement of the prostate is one of the things that I would say is probably not wonderful.
Okay, but this is
good. Enlargement of the
good.
brain is good.
Okay.
And there's an explosion of data now that are out there using music as a research instrument. And I got into this when my sister roped me into a presentation at the LA Chamber Orchestra, of all places. I've had some weird gigs, and that was the weirdest, last spring, which made me really go back and study this and catch up with what's going on. And that's resulted in some other activities going on as well. But music, particularly the learning of new pieces of music, is going to be as valuable as exercise, as learning a new language later in life, as helping to enrich the environment and stimulate those stem cells to grow, divide, and migrate to where they're needed. There is excellent bulletproof data that is going to be one of the strategies. So I think if you would accept that, and I'll give you a supportive argument, we know that people that get certain doses of radiation to the brain for a variety of reasons lose a dose high enough to kill those stem cells, have early cognitive decline.
Wow.
So there are some pretty tight correlations, and we're doing everything in medicine now to try to control the amount of radiation people get over their life during medical surveillance, for example. It's really a big issue in neurosurgery. But I think as you work through a school board and economic woes, as we've all been fighting with, and as you have the opportunity to touch children's lives, they need to be aware that their chances of a really robust and long, healthy life in every way is going to be enormously impacted by doing things like music, by doing athletics, by a spirit of inquiry going through life, taking on new jobs, new bodies of knowledge. It is nothing but good for them.
And when you say learn a new piece of music, what exactly do you mean by that?
There's pretty good evidence that simply listening to or performing music that is totally familiar, or speaking languages that are totally familiar to us, is not bad, but it is not nearly as robust as challenging the mind to interpret or learn something new. And that's why I sort of advise my aging patients that make sure you're not always listening to the same thing.
Wow.
Use your iPod, fill it up with stuff, and just put it on, what do you call it, shuffle or whatever that term is, so that you're hearing different things, and I think that can be valuable. The other thing that music has taught us that is remarkable is the issue of creativity. How do you confront a situation that you've never seen before? How do you confront an enormously dangerous situation? We see it in my field, in the operating room, sudden, uncontrollable hemorrhage from the brain. The initial reaction is that. It's a sympathetic discharge, fight or flight reaction, which is totally destructive. Heart rate goes up, you become diaphoretic, you get a fine tremor. All that's really bad. And there are ways you can turn that off. And music is teaching us where the creative parts of the brain are. What we haven't learned yet, and we know that there are great creative people, and there are those that aren't so. But so how do we learn from the creative ones? What manipulations we can do of our own brain? And I've given talks on this problem within neurosurgery, that there are certain tricks that I use to just shut it down for just a few seconds. To do a sympathectomy, auto-sympathectomy, slow my heart way down, no movement, just dead. And then slowly let the brain get going, let the hands do what they're programmed and taught to do as you think through options. That's a learned capability, not an innate one. And I think what I've seen out of some of the improvisation and music data, it's the same process. They use a different skill set, but I think we're using the same part of the brain.
My goodness, there's a whole book on the improvisation musicians and what they can teach the rest of us. Well, it's tremendously fascinating, and shame on us if we just accept what's happening to us mentally and physically and don't be proactive, because it's going to cost everybody. And the quality of our lives is so dependent on us taking the initiative. Well, I've learned
Absolutely.
something from you. I'm going to be more tolerant of that new music by my that my grandchildren are playing. And I'll blame you.
Well, Mozart took some heat when he was young too. So.
Well, that's true, and we love his music. Can I digress 1 second? And since I'm in charge of this interview, I guess we can. What do you have a particularly happy memory of your time at Central High School?
Absolutely. You know, two people that really struck me when I was here. Three. Keen Van Orden and his wife. What was her name? Mrs. She taught English, and Mr. Van Orden was mathematics. And Claude Woolley. Claude was a tennis buddy of my dad's, and taught sciences. Physics was his particular deal. And I don't think, short of Don Selden at UT Southwestern, I was influenced more
Wow.
By individual people. They were just stunning educators. But
Wow.
they didn't. I remember Mr. Van Orden. He said, we're gonna talk about mathematics for 20 minutes, and we're gonna talk about life for 40. Mm. And that's what he did, and it was inspiring. And he and Mr. Woolley would get their meter sticks and have dueling sword fights out in the patio between their
meter
classrooms.
sticks.
That's correct. I mean, they were just unbelievable.
Well, I think most of us, if we're honest, can look back and say, and I certainly can, pick out 2 or 3 in my years that by showing a little extra with me helped tremendously me on my path of decision making. And families, wonderful. There's no doubt I was blessed with a family who was tremendously influential in molding me. But educator, there's a handful of educators that I am because of them. And I look at life and my relationship and my responsibility and what I owe the world because of things they said and opportunities they gave me. Well, how on earth can we be more proud of you? I'm so grateful that you remembered to come back and remembered some stories about your past to share with us. This is a great city. I've so much been blessed to be here 5 years, and it's a great family town. It's a safe place by and large, safer than most. And so I've now been blessed, as you have, to have had San Angelo in our lives.
No question about it. You know, Cheryl Koshak or Cheryl Pfluger, excuse me, and I were talking about that. The cluster of friends that we grew up with just turned out to be great people, and it was pretty predictable from seeing the kids early on. And we had out in San Angelo, Texas, my dad was a tennis player, 10th ranked in the U.S. when Pearl Harbor was hit. That ended his career. And my mother was a violinist. And in our house, we had Wimbledon champions. We had Isaac Stern, the great musicians that sort of passed through our house. And it was just an example of how a great environment, influences all of us and all of our friends to put you on a path that keeps you out of harm's way.
Absolutely. Well, you're sure contributing to your world, and we thank you.
Thank you.
Keep doing it.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.